Welcome to Just Like Nana. I'm your host, Amy Elizabeth Penny Saylor. Happy to be here with you today and excited that you're on this journey of learning more about yourself, your family, your ancestors. And I mean that very broadly, not just the people that we're biologically related to, but the relationships that we build through lifetimes with people who come into our family through marriage, adoption, whatever that looks like for you and your journey. Today, I am excited to have Missy Toy Ozeas here. She is an energy healer, and that's very broad, but she, in this episode, explains exactly what that means as far as the healing that she provides. Instead of giving you a list of all her accolades, and there are many, and you can check out our website, it will explain her education and experience, I'd love to just read a little portion from her website because it really gets to the gist of what she is looking to provide. It says, "You're not here because you're broken. You're here because you're already doing big things, leading, creating, building, making change. And something keeps getting in the way. An invisible ceiling you can't quite name. A pattern of holding back in the exact moments when you know you should be stepping forward. Maybe you dim yourself in rooms where you're meant to lead. Maybe you overgive until there's nothing left. Maybe you know exactly what you want, but can't seem to let yourself have it. Maybe you've done years of therapy and personal development, and you're still bumping up against the same wall. I see this every day in my work, and I can tell you it's not a mindset problem. It's not a strategy problem. It's an energy problem, and it can be solved." And Missy talks all about that today. I also want to call out, not to do a spoiler here, but there's something so profound, two questions that Missy brings forth during our discussion that I really want to just highlight because I think these two questions can give us so much information and help us during our day in the moments that we need help. And the two questions are, when you find yourself reacting, and I'm using the word reacting purposefully instead of responding, because I think reacting is a little quicker and can often come from a wounded place. There are two questions to ask yourself. One is, what am I defending? And the second is, what am I protecting? And if you stop and think about your interactions with people, and even if it doesn't happen in the moment, if after the fact you reflect on it, I mean, there's always learning that can happen. And you don't need to beat yourself up over, oh, I should have this, or I should have that, or I should have realized this. No, it's all just a path that gives us information. But just to think about, what am I or was I defending? What am I or was I protecting? And I think it will just provide a different perspective that could be very powerful. Welcome to Just Like Nana, Missy. So excited to have you here today. You have so much to share with our listeners.
Oh, thank you. I'm so really excited to be here.
So we like to start, if you have a favorite or powerful memory of one of your grandmothers and what you called her.
Yeah, so my maternal grandmother, I called her Papa. And believe it or not, she's how I first came to know that I had intuitive abilities and that ability to see and connect with my ancestors. So Papa lived with us for a short time right before she actually passed away from cancer. And I was 3 years old and I would wake up. We were both early risers. So I used to wake up really early and I knew she was out there in the kitchen. So I would come out and I would sneak around and I'd put my blanket over my head and I'd try to scare her. And I'd be like, "Woo, like I'm a ghost." And then she would always say, "Oh no, the peanut butter monster is here." And that's because she knew that I loved peanut butter. And that was kind of our special thing. And then really we would sit together. So before everybody woke up, we'd have this kind of quiet time to ourselves. And we have these like little swivel chairs, and we'd put them kind of in the sun, in the living room. And then I would just like twirl around. Like I kind of remember being upside down and just twirling around and around. And she would just watch me and we'd just have our special time together. And that special time together, I think, was so important because when she passed away, I already felt I had this connection that stayed. So right after she passed, our whole family went to the cemetery. And I remember I looked around and I saw her. So I went over to where she was. And to this day, I can remember exactly where she was, standing next to these lion statues. And I walked over there and we spent some time together. And honestly, I wish I could remember what we talked about, but I can't actually remember that right now. But I know that we were continuing a conversation just like we always had. And then I came back and I noticed my family was looking at me like, wait, what are you doing? And my mom asked me, what was that? What were you doing over there? Were you talking to somebody? And then I told her that, oh, yeah, I saw Papa. We were talking. And then I saw in that moment that look on her face. And I saw all my aunties were there, my cousins, and everybody looked at me like, what? Okay, that's kind of strange. My mom asked me a lot of questions about it. And I remember not shaming me, definitely not that, but I could tell underneath there was an energy like, this is kind of strange. This is kind of different. This is not what everybody else sees or does. And in that moment, I decided, okay, this is a bad thing that makes me not belong anymore in my family. So it's something I shouldn't do if I want to belong, if I want to be the same, if I want to stay connected. So from that moment on, I really tried to shut it down. Of course, it would always pop up in different crazy ways. I have lots of crazy stories of being in hotels and different things happening, but it really wasn't until much, much, much later in life that I reconnected back. But Papa to me was that first experience that working with our ancestors, our mediums, speaking, connecting with our ancestors is normal and also very loving.
You talked about, and what a beautiful story about your family. Like there wasn't any shaming. There wasn't, some sort of punishment, but you could kind of also read. And I'm assuming all the other family members were older than you.
Yes. I was one of definitely the youngest. And I had cousins who I just adored. But it was really the look on the face that I think so many of us can read. And that's how we start to form belief systems. And that's a lot of the work that I do. Most of the work that I do is belief work.
Yeah. And what I'm curious about is, okay, so you start to get this belief. And again, not, it wasn't the fault of your family or anything. They were reacting the way anyone would, because that is a unique ability and gift. But then you talked about when you were older, you could kind of reconnect to that. And I'm curious about what the impetus for that was, because a lot of us, even though we don't have that exact experience, we do have those little kid gifts and those innate gifts that we bury, for lack of a better phrase, because of the belonging piece. We want to belong. So I'm curious for you, what kind of brought you back to that?
Yes. So one thing I would like to say is that I actually think that all of us are born with intuitive gifts. So we are taught in school that our five senses, and we learn to really cultivate those five. But there are actually 8 other ones that are intuitive gifts that we all have. And I truly believe we all have one or more of those. And in my case, what I have is clairvoyance, so the ability to see, and then claircognizance, that ability to know, but using those together is what I do in my work. But at the same time, all of the listeners, everybody out there also has those abilities. But okay, so going back to the question. So I actually ignored my intuitive gifts for a long time. Things would pop up every so often and I could see ghosts and spirits and things, even though I tried to tamp it down. And then I went into storytelling and filmmaking. So I did that. Went to college for that. I worked in television for decades. And then one day at work, my boss, he was really nice. And he's like, okay, Missy, it's time for you to move up. And he was trying to be helpful. But out of my mouth, I said, no, And I was like, whoa, okay, that was kind of rude. That was not how I would really want to present myself. But I also knew, okay, there's some truth in that because obviously that's what I actually think. So I really started me down this journey of like, okay, well, if that's my no, there's got to be a yes component to it. So sometimes we know things like that, or we find things out about ourselves, but we're not really ready to like deal with it yet. So I actually went a bunch more years basically ignoring the fact that I knew I was in the wrong place and the wrong career. And I kept getting this feeling like, well, I know I really feel like I'm meant to be doing something different, but I was scared because belonging is a big thing for me. So I thought, oh, well, I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I want to belong with my family in filmmaking. So anyways, what happened is I actually went to Spain and I was dancing and I tore my calf muscle, which was actually the greatest thing in the world because it sidelined me for a couple months. So I couldn't work. And that is also how spirit works with us because I wasn't listening. So spirit needed to say, okay, Missy, you're not going to listen, but this is where you need to go. So we're going to sideline you so you can't do anything but be with yourself. And also, fun fact, your calf represents your connection to spirit. So we have like different body parts that symbolically represent different things, right? So connection to spirit is actually your calf. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, spirit is like, I'm going to make this really obvious for you. There is a disconnection here.
Exactly. Exactly. So a lot of us can reframe things that happen to us too, right? With this lens. I didn't know it at the time. So anyway, really what happened was I reconnected back to myself. I remembered that meditation had been a big part of my life in my 20s and I hadn't done it when I became a mom and got quote too busy. So I really reconnected to meditation and I heard somewhere someone saying, well, when you ask the universe a question, it has to answer you. So I was like, okay, I'm going to ask. Like every day, I'm going to ask, show me who I am. And I did twice a day. And that's a great question to ask spirit. So I asked, and okay, took longer than I thought, but it took 4 months. But in 4 months, I actually heard a voice in meditation, which is not something that happens a lot. Hearing things isn't one of my strong points. But I heard a voice in my ear that said, you are a healer. And I was like, oh my God, that is crazy. Like, that's nothing. I mean, I come from a family that is very rational. And I didn't grow up going to healers. I didn't even know what a healer was, actually. So again, we can hear something or know something, but it might take a long time for your thinking mind to come on board. And I had a lot of beliefs in my body that led me to think, okay, that's woo woo, that's crazy. Like, I mean, there were a million things going on. And so it took a long time for my thinking mind to come on board to be able to move in that direction. But at the same time, I was aware enough where I could feel inside that's true, actually. As crazy as it sounds, I knew inside that that was true. And then after that, it was just a series of events. Every door opened, and I was gifted a healing course. Like so many crazy things happened. And I think that kind of is what happens. Like our ancestors will kind of start opening the door for us, and our work is to step through it, which can be scary sometimes, but that is the work. Taking action is part of the work.
I love every step in there. And I'm sure there's so much in that listeners can resonate with, no matter where they are on their path. I think one thing that, when you were talking about being successful in your kind of first career, I'll call it, and, being offered a promotion and all these things, I think sometimes where really smart, capable people can get stuck is, but I'm good at this. There's sort of like, you feel like if you're good at something, that must be what you're supposed to do. And kind of divorcing those two concepts of, I can be good at a lot of things. That doesn't mean that's my path.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of times every time I think we learn from the thing that we're in, and maybe we need some of those pieces that will then help us in the next iteration of ourselves. So it's always like we're evolving. And sometimes we think like, oh gosh, if I close that door, something worse is on the other side. So I think a lot of times there's that kind of thinking too. So better to stay safe. And that is a lot of actually ancestral energy. And many of us have that because our ancestors lived in a time where things actually were a lot more, I would talk about survival, like dangerous, like food or money. If we even think about the energy of money, centuries and centuries and centuries ago, there was no money. People had to like dig into the ground to find gold or a shell, like money. Now we don't even touch really money anymore. It's like a currency of energy that's out there, PayPal or Venmo and things like that. So even money is very different for our ancestors than it was to us, yet many of us carry money beliefs that are very outdated.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, when you talk about the rational versus the woo, and I mean, we're kind of making up a dichotomy that doesn't exactly
Yes.
exist, but for purposes of the conversation, it's funny to me because as I get older, I get so much more comfortable with the woo
Yeah.
and specifically with understanding that I don't know all there is to know. When I say I'm more comfortable with it, I don't mean like, oh, I understand it now. And here's the universe of the woo, and here are its four corners. But really just appreciating one, I don't have the same experience that everyone else has. So people experience things differently. And two, of course, there's so much more out there than like our earthly bound existence of, to your point, eating and money, which represents survival. And so I think because we have a little more space for the woo than maybe our ancestors had, we can explore it more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of our ancestors were so intuitive and really had these gifts, but kind of had to tamp it down because survival came first. And that's really what we're working through as I would say collective, as a society now is really moving from that masculine energy, which is survival and action, which is very important, but into also equally balancing out that intuitive side that has connections to the unseen. Like our ancestors did use those intuitive abilities before.
I would love to transition to, because we've gone around the edges of it, your work. If you can kind of explain, here is what I do as a healer and how that kind of energy healing work intersects with our ancestors, our ancestral trauma, ancestral healing.
Yes. So I work primarily with the energy of beliefs. So when someone says energy healer, I think it's so broad. It can mean hands-on healing, it can mean so many things. But for me, I'm really talking about the energy of beliefs. So quantum physics will tell us that our bodies, this world, the desk is made of energy. I think most people kind of understand that concept. But what a lot of people don't realize is that our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions are also pieces of energy that can actually be found in very specific places in the body. We store them in the body or we inherit from, our ancestors and they live in the body. And what we believe to me is so important because it forms the foundation of everything that comes after that, our reality. So our beliefs then create our thoughts create emotions, our emotions create our response, like how we respond to other people or other events. And our responses actually then generate the reality that we see around us. So to me, the beliefs are the most important. So that's primarily what I work with. I work with mostly women, actually. I mean, I'll work with men or women, but mostly it tends to be women. And mostly around, I would say for me, it's mostly people come to me around their purpose, finding their purpose, around being seen. And that could be a million different things. And money is another big one. Self-confidence and things like that. And always there are beliefs in there that are blocking what you actually want. And so my work is actually super specific. And that's maybe the kind of weird thing about me, but I can find a very specific belief, like the very specific belief, the age you were when you trapped it, or the ancestor you inherited it from, and where it lives specifically in the body. So after working with people for a long time, really, I would say our beliefs come from one of three places. So either your childhood from this core life, usually before the age of 8, because that's when your subconscious is open and absorbing. or inherited. And then sometimes there's past life beliefs too. But I think usually beliefs tend to present themselves in layers around your body will prioritize what's most important for you to release first. So your body will always show me what's most important to release. So I'm not like deciding, I'm just reading what it is. And I would say most of the time, the childhood beliefs will kind of come up first and then the ancestral and then maybe past life, but usually is in that sort of layered position. And when I work with someone, I just ask to see it. So if I'm working with somebody and it's an ancestral belief specifically, I will be able to tell because your ancestor will show up. So if it's on your right shoulder, if I see that, that's your mother's side for me. This is just my way of reading. Doesn't mean it's true for everybody. And then your left shoulder would be your father's side. And then I would count back. So I'd be able to go, oh, okay, it's mom's side. Oh, okay, that's your great grandma. And usually that person will show up either because what you're specifically working on is related to her and she originated that belief. Or it could be she's showing up because she's your spirit guide or she's there to support you. So, we have to kind of dive in a little bit deeper to figure it out. But it'll be usually one of those two things. But that's like my favorite thing is working in session with people and seeing and connecting to their ancestors. And often it's like an ancestor they didn't know. Or maybe it's somebody they're like, oh yeah, I totally know. But that's also part of the fun work is like, okay, after the session, go back and, okay, here's the belief. Go back and do a little bit of research.
That is amazing. So one very practical thing I want to go back to when you were sort of explaining, I think you said, how did it go? Beliefs, emotions?
Thoughts.
Thoughts.
What you believe then creates a thought.
Yep.
And then your thoughts actually generate emotion because if you think, I'm just going to make it up, like I'm terrible at business and I'm a terrible business person, that actually is going to show up because you're going to start feeling bad about yourself.
Yeah. And then that creates like an action or a consequence, a result. And what I find fascinating about that is that I'm sure then that result kind of goes back to the beginning and reinforces your belief. See, I am bad at business. Look at this result.
Exactly right. And the other thing is that they're so subconscious, and that's why we do the work, because a lot of times we might not know that belief is running in the background. So is it okay if I share a story?
Absolutely, please.
So I have this client, Gina, who's amazing. And she came to me, she had her own business and she did quote like all the right things, like business coach and like funnels and all the things. And she was like, I just can't break through financially with my business. I can't really make money here. And she tried for a long time. So we just asked. So I'll just ask, okay, so so we bring in, her guides, we get into the session. And then what happened was I saw her great grandfather on her father's side. And it was having money isn't safe. And I didn't know the background. In fact, the more I don't know, the better it is. I don't want to know anything, right? I just want to read it. So I was like, oh, that's super interesting. Like, do you know him? Do you know his story? And so what it turned out is her great grandfather was in Italy. He was a little boy. His parents had, I think it was a laundry business, and they were harassed by the mafia there. And so they had to turn over their money. Every time they made money, they had to turn over money. So then they said, okay, we're going to move. So they moved to New York, and the exact same thing happened in the United States to the family. And in fact, their laundromat, I think, burned down. There was other things going on that felt very unsafe. So that family lineage carried the belief that having money is not safe. And she still carried it in her, even though that wasn't her actual life's experience. So that's an example of how a belief can come through the family lineage, and we could find the exact belief. We could trace it to the ancestor. She could go back. She asked her parents about it. She could get more information. And a lot of times it's simply the awareness and the knowledge of it. Another thing I would say is that our ancestors, they want to be seen. So sometimes it's that feeling of, oh my gosh, great grandpa, I see what that felt like for you, like connecting to that fear and really connect and say, I see you, sometimes that's enough to witness and say, I see you, and we can let this go together. And then she can also have more awareness herself. We do a lot of journaling together around that, and like, how has money felt unsafe in your life, in your father's life? We trace it back. We journal about it, and then she has an awareness. So every time she's going to go to spend money, what happens in her body? Does she feel like, like I can't do this? Or receiving money? Actually, I would say when she receives money, does that bring up a lot of fear because, oh no, now I'm vulnerable, now it's dangerous. But being aware of what that exact belief is, I think to me makes it a lot faster to actually really work with something and heal something. And to heal actually really means to balance. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm doing something to you or anything like that. It's really in partnership. So to me, energy work, ancestral work is in partnership. So it's like your team and my team. And when I say team, I mean my higher self, my ancestors, my spirit guides, and yours are working together. So it's always partnership. It's not like the healer, well, this is my belief, the healer does something to you and then it's like, oh, okay, then it's done, right? It's something we need to do together.
Yeah.
Oh, and so I
Yes.
will say
Oh,
the
please.
end of that story is Gina made more in Q1 of 2025 than she did in all of 2024.
Wow. That's incredible. Oh my gosh, there's so much to that. So, one of the things that really came up for me is how, we kind of talked in the beginning about how there's so many different approaches to relationships with your ancestors and ancestral healing and or balance. Some things are going to feel right to people, some methodologies aren't, but the one real similarity that I've heard from nearly every single guest who is an expert and has appeared is this. You called it witnessing, being seen. Acknowledgement is another word I've heard. Just this acknowledging, both within ourselves and for our ancestors, of, oh, that happened. I see it. I see how scary that was for you. And just the amazing, I'll call it energetic healing power that's contained within that moment and that real connection and acknowledgement is really just phenomenal.
Yes. And we can also think about like if we have a child, right? Any person really feeling, seen, and witnessed is a healing actually, because that's really what everybody wants is to be seen and witnessed, right? And accepted and loved for who they are. And like, I see you, I see your story, I see your pain, I see your gifts. And that, like that actually makes me feel emotional because that is also what our ancestors want, and that's how we heal a lineage.
So I'll speak for myself, but I know this is something that a lot of people experience is you talked about that feeling of belonging and connection to your family. And sometimes that can be cut off for many reasons. Death, adoption, the way adults choose to interact with each other and maybe, okay, now this part of the family doesn't talk to that part of the family, that sort of thing. And I know for myself, I felt like I don't really have access to my ancestors, or those aren't people I knew, or I didn't know. I can't ask my grandma about, tell me about your grandma or things like that. And so I thought that it wasn't available to me. But one thing I'm really starting to understand is it doesn't matter what choices were made by anyone. I belong with my family. And can you just kind of address that for a listener who might think, well, that's a nice story you told, but she could go back to her parents and her parents gave her that connection to her great grandpa. But can you kind of talk about actually the connection is within each of us?
Yes, there is, because in the same way we get our hair color and eye color through our DNA, we do inherit many beliefs as well as the gifts of our ancestors through our lineage. And I think you're right. It doesn't matter if you actually know them or not, because we can also cultivate a connection whether you knew that person or not. And we can talk later about the different ways to do that. But one example is, so I had a client and we found a limiting belief from, I think it was her father's, also great grandfather. And she was kind of working through that. And so she went to go do some research. She didn't know him at all because her father had died. So similar to you, she was saying, I'm not connected to him. I don't even know what his name is. And I don't have anybody that I can ask about this. But she was able somehow to find her family tree or to figure it out. So she found out his name, and she could look and do some research online about him. And she found out all these amazing things about him. One of them being that he was a very big philanthropist. And we had just been talking with her about volunteering as an action to take. We didn't know anything about her ancestor, but once she connected and could read about all of the ways that he had opened his home and his heart to orphans and things like that, it really sparked something in her. I was like, yes. And she literally got on the phone and volunteered for 2 different things as a way actually to honor her great grandfather, even though she didn't know him. Sometimes us taking an action like that in his honor really moves energy and connects us back. So I don't think we always have to know. And even in that case, she was able to actually do some research. Even if we can't do that, one of my favorite things is actually taking a walk with my ancestors. And so if you don't know anything about your ancestors, sometimes just taking a walk and inviting them in. So it's that intention. Okay, I would really love to connect. And you can either name the person or you can say, oh, my mother's line. The females in my mother's line, I would like to walk with you. And sometimes just the act of walking where we're kind of doing something else, we're moving our bodies, we're kind of open, that your ancestors will fall in line with you. And I feel like for me, that was a really great way. It still is. I do it a lot. Great way to connect. And you might be able to see them, sense them. Maybe a message will come through. So I don't think you have to know exactly who your ancestors are, but it's an intention to connect, because intention is what moves energy. And also they're looking for an invitation. Just like you could think about that, right? Like if you wanted to connect with your neighbor, right? You're never going to connect unless you actually go knock on the door or you meet them or you call them or text them. So reaching out is part of the work.
I love that. I love that the intention is what moves the energy. And I will say that has been part of my experience is it takes, I'll just say so little on our part. And our ancestors just kind of jump in of, thank you for inviting me. Here I am. Let's move this forward. And it does bring this sense of kind of like place of, okay, I am part of this family. I belong with this family. It doesn't matter if so-and-so's grandpa left so-and-so and that entire part of the line is gone. They're here now.
Yes, and so much repair can happen. Because also we think about it, or this is my belief, that we are all spirits. We come in and we choose this body. So right now, my spirit came in and decided to play the role of Missy. But that isn't all of who I am. So just like your, I don't know, great grandfather who, maybe there was something that happened that didn't go well in the family and the family was fractured. And everybody blames the great grandma. Yeah, a grandpa, maybe, yes. We don't want to just gloss over things, but also that's only one part of his soul. He came to play that role, but it's not all of who he is.
Right. Yeah. Love that so much. You've kind of touched on this, but can you talk a little bit about the gifts that we can get from our ancestors also?
Yeah. So I love it so we talk a lot about ancestral healing. I think a lot of people focus on the trauma of it, which there is trauma that can be passed on, but also there are all the gifts. And I think that's the great part of connecting, because when we connect with our ancestors, we can work with them through releasing some of the beliefs, but they also have these very specific gifts. And it's really fun if we're able to trace it back. Even if we aren't, we can kind of even get a feeling like, oh, well, I can tell like my mom is really good at sewing. Right. And then you could ask, oh, does that go further up? And you could kind of do some investigations, but there's always gifts that come through our lineage all the time. And they might be the things we were talking about before, like one of your clairs, right? One of your intuitive gifts, for sure could come through the line, or, some very practical things, or maybe some, just that idea that, you're an empath or that you love helping people, things like that.
And even the story you told about the philanthropist and then, the great-granddaughter or the great-great-granddaughter is then volunteering.
Yes.
That's so beautiful. Your newsletter is incredible,
Oh, thank
which
you.
is a sentence I don't often say.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so heartfelt and so raw, but it's also just practical. It's not just sort of, oh, here's an ethereal idea, which it does contain, but then kind of distilled down into, and here's one or two things to think about. So I just love it. I did read the one recently on sovereignty, and it just kind of leapt off the page to me. And that's not a word we use real often, but I think it's really important and it informs a lot about, our own selves and our ancestors and kind of where we draw lines. Can you just kind of give us the 101 on sovereignty?
Yeah. So when I talk about sovereignty, I'm usually talking about energetic sovereignty. So to me, we're going to take it back to beliefs in our energy field. So I believe that we all beings have an energetic field, plants, animals, dogs, people. We all have an energy field that is composed of what we believe and what we feel, and it's all around us. And what happens, especially with highly sensitive people, which are probably a lot in your community, we take on we're like a sponge, so that that energy field just becomes cluttered with everybody. How's my mom feeling today? Well, oh my god, my partner's upset. It's not at me, but he's still upset. And oh no, now I feel this way. Or my daughter, right? Whatever it is, we just take it all in and we become really heavy and we can't even feel ourselves anymore. So to me, sovereignty is having seniority and authority over your own life force energy. That means you get to choose. That means actually what it really means is radical personal responsibility. It means am responsible for choosing what I believe, what I feel, what I think, even if it's at odds with everyone else. So I'm not saying it's so necessarily easy all the time, but it is simple. So another way, kind of, I think, like something that I think is helpful is this idea of walking through the world with nothing to defend and nothing to prove. So if we really sit with, whoa, what would that feel like? Because and I have to watch myself a lot around other people. Like, am I saying this because I'm defending a position? Am I, because I want to be right or whatever the reason? um, you know, or am I proving something, right? Am I trying to prove something to somebody to belong or to be liked? And we all do this, but that kind of pushing and pulling energy doesn't feel good to other people. And if we kind of think about, everyone can kind of think about, well, who's somebody that they love being around? And probably it's somebody who's right in the center of themselves. So they're not trying to defend. They're not trying to prove. They're not trying to change your mind or make you think a different way. You can feel that they're grounded and they know what they think. They know what they feel. And they also are giving you permission. So another way to say it is, I give you 100% permission to have all of your own ideas, thoughts, and emotions. And I give myself 100% permission to have all of my ideas, beliefs, and emotions. And then we can coexist together. So to me, sovereignty is really that authority, seniority over your own field.
Wow. And, I think another part of that, it kind of, and yes, as a highly sensitive person, I'm hearing you about,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from Minnesota and there's the Minnesota State Fair, which is a huge deal to Minnesotans. And it is my nightmare. And I try to explain it. I have adult children and I'm like, it's like there's a cloud gathering over everyone of all their feelings, thoughts, beliefs, like what they're experiencing in this moment. And it just like whoop, comes into me.
Yes. That.
Awful. Yeah, I don't want to experience that. I'm sure now a Minnesotan will listen to this. How could she talk bad about the state fair? But the point is, another step in that I'm really learning to regulate is, and then I think I have to fix it all.
Yes,
And
exactly.
Yeah. And what I've realized is it's not just about me, it's also about that other person. They didn't ask me to fix it. So that's another part of just like not only your own sovereignty, but letting other people and even people you really, really loved. I mean, I mentioned I have adult children. Yeah, they struggle sometimes and they don't need me to like jump in and fix it. And they didn't ask.
Yes, that's so huge. And that's sort of that belief, like we think we have to, especially moms, like we have to carry everybody. And just because we can feel their distress, and especially when we're highly sensitive, we can really tune in and feel people's expectations and their struggles and their pain. But really, our work is how can we walk with you instead of carrying you? How can I hold space for you? But I love you so much. I trust you so much. I trust your path. I know you're going to get there. I'm right here with you. But I'm not, that's very different than I'm going to fix it or carry you.
Right. I love that. This is like the 101 on how to be a good ancestor.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other great thing is our ancestors also are with us that same way because our ancestors are never gonna like shame you or make you do something. It's not that type of relationship. I'm glad you asked that question because I think it's like that. They're walking with us. And I don't know, so I'm a big movie person. So I don't know if anybody saw the new Moana, the live one. There's this one scene, it was like, oh my gosh, because she's sailing on the ocean, which it was her desire, but she was taught that desire is bad or wrong. But when she actually connected back to that desire, that was her ancestors calling her forward to her lineage, which was being a voyager. And so she sets out, and then there's this moment she has of doubt, and she's on the ocean, and she just looks around, and like all her ancestors are there sailing with her. It was like, so emotional, but
Oh,
that is what it's like. Like if we could see our ancestors, that's what I see in my clients, in everybody. It's like there's ancestors with us all the time. They're right there. They're just waiting to be seen and communicated with.
that is a beautiful way to end. So I'm going to say thank you, Missy, so much for sharing with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so fun. I love it. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much for being here with us today at Just Like Nana. So excited to have you here. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you can take away a little piece of something that makes your journey, your healing, your day, your family just a little softer and brighter. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Just Like Nana's theme music was written and performed by Carter Penny. Can't wait to talk to you next Friday.